Hi everyone, this is the Question GM. So I'm back here to make another video for Out the Abyss, for prepping Out the Abyss if you're still running the Adventure module for your group. Um, so part of the reason why I took a long time to get to do this one video after my last one was because chapter 2 is actually a pretty important chapter in my view to run Out the Abyss because it's this chapter 2 and the second in chapter let me just see, I think it's chapter 7 if I'm not mistaken. No, chapter 10, which is the second in the second half of the adventure module, deals with covers the traveling bits when the characters are in the Underdark, and what you can do, or what you can uh, launch onto the adventures, you know from while they're traveling from point A to point B. So for me, I feel like the traveling chapters in Out the Abyss, they although they may seem, they just take up a very small portion of the book, but they do carry like a very huge bulk of the adventure, and I feel like it's actually it's some of the more important parts of the adventure, and it can, if done correctly or done poorly, it can really make or break the adventure module for your players. uh, I certainly didn't have a very perfect experience when it comes to doing the traveling bits in Out the Abyss, and part of the is I guess it's part of the reason why one of my players left my group, because he found that the traveling portion was taking up too much time, and it was not exactly what he signed up for. Among other reasons. I wouldn't say that it was the reason why he left the group, but I definitely felt that it was a contributing factor, that he decided that, okay, that this is not worth his time to go through. So I definitely believe that, if you really went to read ahead to prepare for chapter 2, and to sort of set your own expectations and as well as your group expectations about what's about to happen in the Underdark, and how do they travel, and how do you manage the traveling, how do you organize the traveling, what directions do you want to go with the traveling parts of traveling in the Underdark, can really benefit your prep. uh, and I'm basically coming to make this video, partly to show you some of my mistakes, because and also partly to help you wrap your head around what's being said around the book. And sometimes reading the adventure module itself is not really enough, because there may be certain parts that, it sounds all right on paper, but it may have different implications to you when you actually start running the game. And I'm trying to make this video so that you don't come unprepared for this. uh, so I think, and given that, chapter 2, there's actually a lot of information inside chapter 2 that you really need to like organize it for yourself. uh, and I have a feeling, and I'm trying to do something a bit different with this video right now, in the sense that instead of, just for me to just prep all my notes like I usually do for my first two videos, I think I want to take it a bit more slowly this time, in the sense that I want to just like go, flip the book with you as you're reading through it, and maybe, maybe it will also jog my memory of how I ran it, or what were some of the ideas that came to my mind that didn't work out, or things like that. So this is going to be a pretty slow video, as if it's not very slow enough. um, I'm going to apologize for that in advance, but I think there might be something beneficial of doing it this way, rather than, for me just to shoot out everything at one go. uh, so here we go. So like I said, I'm apologizing because this is probably going to be like a very, very long video. So I highly suggest, just don't pay attention to me saying it. Just listen to this and do something else. Hopefully, maybe even as you're doing your own prep for chapter 2, and maybe, you can treat this like a back and forth with yourself, as well as me when I'm going through the chapter. So I've just tried to basically break down the chapter into its, its subtopics parts. So the summary is basically, it's gonna start with where to go, uh, which is basically just comes down to, deciding where does your characters and your party want to go. and then it goes down into Underdark travel. So this one's going to take this one doesn't take a big portion. I would say it starts from page 18, and then it sort of like just peters out. I think by page 21, it peters out. It finishes at saying everything it needs to say in just 3 pages. But I think there's a lot of things being left unsaid inside there that you sort of need to pay attention to. That they may be linking you to other parts or other books, for example, like the PHB or the DMG. So I think I'll be focusing quite a bit on that, on Underdark travel, and there'll be another part later on that I will heavily focus on, especially for DMs, because I believe that it's going to be quite helpful for how you're going to prep for this adventure, for this chapter. So after the Underdark travel, you have the equipment, which is pretty short one, like equipment, madness, death. These are just pretty short sections of the chapter. You can basically listen. Those I don't really have much to say for these parts, but it's still good to maybe I'll just try to help you summarize to see what you can do with them, or what sort of things, what sort of factors do they play into the Underdark travel. And after that, you have the fungi of the Underdark. Now, this one it's pretty much self-explanatory in a way, but it runs for like about. It starts from page 22 to about page 23. It's about 2 pages. But this one I would feel like it's definitely beneficial if you really take the time to go through all the fungi mentioned in these sections, list them out, organize them in a way that it's easy for you to research the information when you need it at hand. This is definitely one of those uh, information that if you have your own custom DM screen, definitely put this list in there. You want it you want it at a moment's notice, because it's going to be helpful for you later on when you're even during and before running the game. Okay, then the next we come is to the narrating the journey. This one is more like into DM techniques. It's really depends on how good you how much experience you have as a DM. I'm not really sure if I can really give you really good pointers to help you, inc- uh, make you a good narrator in a sense. Like unless you have some sort of like writing background, or you are very natural with language, yeah, then definitely I don't think it wouldn't be a problem. But I feel like this section could have definitely benefited if the designers actually gave you a bit more pointers about like how to narrate uh, the journey while the players are traveling through the Underdark. Okay, so another main important section will be the drop pursuit. Okay, I'll be honest, I didn't really use this section very much during my running of the Abyss, but after I was reading through it, I felt that maybe yes, I could have used it in my game, uh, but I think there were some factors that I'll talk a bit more when I reach that section. Why there's some things you need to keep in mind if you're using this drop pursuit mechanic. And it it you have to decide for yourself whether you want to use it or not. Okay, now the next section that I was going to really heavily emphasize, it was definitely the random encounters, because given the amount of time spent in the Underdark, and you have to remember sometimes that depending how you decided where the exit of the Underdark is, that will determine how long your characters will be spending in the Underdark. So the amount of encounters that they will be expecting to go through during their time in the Underdark, especially outside of like settlements like Dracosta, Glimstone, um, that amount of time can vary from pretty little to quite a bit to really large amounts. So there is that you have to cater for that range, depending how you want to run this chapter. So the book this section of the book itself just gives you, they do give you quite a little bit of material to work with. So let me just go through the page count. It starts on page 25, and it ends about page 30. So there's about 5 pages worth of material to work with. uh, but I'll get into that about the materials part later on in this video. Okay, and the final section of the chapter would be the set encounters. So namely the ones that you have would be the silken path, the Hook Horror Hunt, let me see, the Oozing Temple, and the Lost Tomb of Caim. So that's only just about four. That's only, yeah. That's only about just only just four set encounters within the book itself. Uh, I would definitely recommend you to like find a bit more than that. But you know, we'll get to that part as when I reach that part. Okay, so let's just start with the first section, where to go, which doesn't have a lot. I mean, there's not really a lot to think about, but in the sense that it's your starting point of how you want to prep your how to want to prep for this chapter. So the decision of where does your players want to go starts pretty early on. Actually, it actually starts. Oh, sorry. Okay. Okay, I think before we get to that part about talking about where to go, I just want to maybe just give a little more introduction to the second chapter. Basically, just to talk about more about what is it about. So, and this is, this is helpful in a way that in the sense that you want to know what's the direction that you as a GM you want to give to your players. Where do you want to go with this? How do you want to do it? That informs how you want to do this chapter. So in the book itself, it generally just boils down to a few things. Number one is just to, it's just mainly traveling in the Underdark, and that in itself, that in itself is also a very huge portion of materials that you have to prepare, and that's a lot of work. That's where most of the work is being done. But doing the Underdark travel gives you an opportunity as a DM to bring life to the Underdark. And if this is your first foray into the Underdark, whether for you as a DM or for your players, this is where there is that setting part that you can. That's a flavor of the module and of the setting itself, the Underdark. So definitely try to read up on, get inspired and find your creative juices about the Underdark or how you want to make it. And this is definitely the place for you to shine. Like in the previous chapter, it's just Velcon Valve. That was just, just getting exposed to very small parts of the Underdark, in the sense like Drow and the slaves and the other races and that sort of thing. But it's in this chapter where, where you get to fully bring out the sort of wonders of the Underdark, if you can call it that, as well as the dangers. So that's definitely something that, as a DM, if you are running this chapter, this is your opportunity. This is the one where you want to bring out the flavor of the Underdark. And the third reason of why you want to, what this chapter is for, is basically just to help your characters to go get up to speed in a way. We're talking because depending on how you run the escape from Velcon Valve, your characters are likely to be lacking a few things. Number one is equipment. Depending how good they plan their escape, they may not actually get a lot of equipment. If you're even lucky, they may even only just get their starting equipment, and that's about it. And they're going to need a lot more equipment than that, as well as supplies, which we'll get into a bit later on. Gaining up levels and getting XP, fighting monsters, fighting random encounters, or meeting random strange people and learning things along the go. There's definitely a lot of opportunities to get XP inside chapter 2. And magic items. Surprisingly enough, like in chapter 2, in most of the random encounters in chapter 2, the ones they provided in the book, some of them actually do carry magical items with them. So if they killed some of the random encounters, they defeat some of the random encounters here, they may actually have access to. They may actually lead them to certain magical items, and even in the set encounters, especially like the Lost Tomb of Cain, there is actually an opportunity to get a rather powerful magical item, and it really and how and you sort of need to plan the timing of getting that magical item. You don't want to give it to them too soon, but you don't exactly try to plan for them to not ever get it, like miss the opportunity. I mean, don't make I will feel like for that magical item, don't make it too easy, but don't make it too but making it too difficult may deter them from even trying. So yeah. And okay, the real big intention, this may not be an intent of the chapter of chapter 2, but what you're going to find when you start reading chapter 2 is that it's going, and if you're going to run it by the book, or you're going to run it by how the designers seem to imply for it to be run in its way, is that it's going to be a huge resource management exercise. Now, uh, that really depends if your group is going to find that fun, because you're gonna need a huge amount of tracking, and you're talking about trackings for equipment, tracking for food and water, uh, tracking for madness. You're talking about tracking for are they in the fey race, are they not in the fey race. You're going to track for the drought pursuits. uh, so it's a real it can be a real burden to track all these things down. Like even just equipment, just tracking of equipment and food and water itself is already a huge task for players to handle. So there is fun in that. I generally believe that it's the resource management aspect of the traveling is actually quite fun, because the players will have to decide what sort of risks they want to take, uh, and may deter their traveling, the directions of where they want to go. They may, if they are lacking down of food, they may actually have to detour themselves from their destination just for the sake of finding more food or water, or some other reasons, some other supplies that they need. And I think there's a lot of fun in that, but at the same time, the cost of getting that kind of fun is the tracking bits. And I know for a fact my players actually didn't enjoy that part of the traveling, the tracking and the resource management and the deciding of food and water, that sort of thing. So this one I would highly cautious DMs, check with your group whether they enjoy this particular kind of play of resource management. If not, then I would make suggestions like you have to find a way to shorten traveling to not be so tedious. You have to find another way to to run this chapter, and it's going to be a huge deviation from how the book presents it. And uh, even most of my advice that I'm going to give in this video are going to be more towards the tracking type, because if you're gonna do traveling in a different way that does not involve resource management, then it's almost like as if you're doing like fast traveling in a CRPG. It's gonna take for me, it's gonna take a lot of take the fun out of it for me as a DM. But but when I started implementing the fast travel system, or just going through very few encounters to reach their next destination, that was actually more fun for my players. So yeah, I would as a DM, I would definitely suggest check with your group. Check with your group, are they into that sort of thing? And it's probably one of the first few things you should set expectations with your group earlier on, to tell them before you run out the abyss that this is gonna be difficult, it's gonna be deadly, and there's resource management involved. Are you in or are you out? All right. Now that we settled with talking about the main business of talking what the whole objective of the second chapter is about, let's get into the first section. All right. So Underdark travel. So, like I said, this is going to be the portion of the rules where this is going to be a portion of the chapter where you're going to have to check with a lot of rules. You're going to check rules that are not specifically mentioned in Out the Abyss. Uh, it's gonna refer to rules, for example, like with the player's handbook, chapter 8, which is the adventuring chapter in the player's handbook. Then there's gonna have like activities inside the Underdark itself, uh, that talks like foraging. So foraging itself is mentioned in uh, the foraging is not in the player's handbook. Foraging is actually found in the Dungeon Master's Guide. So you see, there's gonna be a lot of like cross-referencing happening. So I'm gonna like trying to help you point out what I've already read in advance. And when I had to do my homework while prepping for this session for chapter 2, and I didn't have enough time, it was actually very frustrating to see them say, okay, go read chapter 8 in the player's handbook, and I'm really like, I don't have time to even finish this particular chapter. You want me to go read chapter 8? It was very frustrating. So I'm trying to save you time on that. Okay. So in the Underdark travel bits, there are a few things I would say you need to think. You have to think mainly about. Uh, a few points that you have to really pay attention to and really consider and make a decision about it. Number one would be the destination and the distance. So, oh dear. Okay, so destination and distance will be decided by who's in the party after the party has escaped from Welcome Wealth. And in the book itself, if you go under the where to go section, that will be just the first few chapters, first few pages. Where to go would be just right at the beginning, chapter page 17. Basically, they're just saying like um, depending on who's in the party when they have escaped from Welcome Wealth, there are a few places that each particular prisoner wants to go. So some actually have a specific destination they want to go, especially the Underdark races. Those that are usually from the surface that are usually, they are indifferent. They just want to just go up to the surface, and they will actually follow the party to go anywhere they will take them up to the surface. So the key NPCs from Valkenville that has a specific destination would be Pupido, who wants to go to Krakostak. And to get to Greco-Stuck from Vulcanvale, they will have to cross the Dark Lake. Actually, pretty much all the locations that is mentioned that each of the NPCs want to go will have to cross the Dark Lake. So that will take them into a collision course with Shusha's home village, which is Lupudop, which is at the coast near to on the side of Dark Lake where Vulcanvale is. So if Bupido wants to go to Grakostak, the most natural way would be to go to Slupudup first, and then go across where Shusha is supposed to promise the NPCs, promise the party that they can actually get boats across, and probably even guided by the quotas to get across the to Grakostak. So Bupido wants to go to Grakostak. Jimja wants to go back to Blingdenstone. Now theoretically, actually Blingdenstone would be the nearest uh, to Valkenvale, but it will still require a crossing across the Dark Lake, or if they actually want to, you actually want to spend time going around the lake, uh, and Jimja is the one who wants to go there. He's probably able to guide. I think he's able to guide the NPCs. Yeah, he can guide the NPCs to Blindenstone from Valkenvale. Okay, and technically it is quite you can use the promise that Blindenstone will have an exit to the surface. And okay, that's also probably something I need to talk about, the exit for the surface, because in I like I mentioned in my pre-prep video, you want to decide where you want to think about and decide where the exit of to the on the dark is. Is it one place, or is it already in a specific place, or you just want to like um, leave it at the put it at the last place that the players visit, and that's how they get out to the Underdark. Because this is where you can potentially actually bypass a whole section of the adventure in itself if the players decide to go to straight to Blindenstone and they make it there and they find the exit to the surface, and that's it. That's the first half of it done. So you're already skipping parts, like you're skipping parts. Technically, Slupudup, you can skip Slupudup, you can skip Grakostak, you can skip Neverlight Grove. So if you are deciding that the choice of the exit is up to the players, then yes, you have to take in consideration that this is a potential place where they can actually skip everything and just go straight to Blinder Store and then settle what's happened there, and then they just leave. But if you're doing it in the inverse way, like the like for what I did is I let the players explore start Neverlight Grove, then Blingden Stone, and that's where they exited from the Underdark. So because I wanted to make sure that all my players had a chance to go through each of the cities that was mentioned in the module itself. Um, if you want to call that railroading, that's fine. But I felt that I just wanted to give my players, a full experience of the module as much as I can, even though I didn't did the traveling parts as heavily focused as I wanted it to, which is probably fine because in the sense that I sort of had to compensate the lack of traveling with going through the individual chapters more closely. But these are some of the things that you, as a DM, you need to just think in advance. And if you make your decision that the exit will be in Blindenstone, then also be open to the possibility that your players could bypass everything and head straight to Blindenstone. I probably have seen some complaints about this in the Audio Biz Facebook group. That some players felt that some DMs were a bit concerned that is it all right to let the players just exit out from Blindon without going to the other areas. I think that's perfectly fine because that's a player's choice, and if they made a good decision, let them have it. Uh, but if you're not if you are the DM who are you really want to make the most out of your modules, then really think about really reconsider uh, where you want to put the exit. So okay, moving on. The next NPC who has a place to go is Sharif, which is the drow, and in the book it says is that he's sort of wants to go to Neverlight Grove, and he can. And in the book, actually even calls him like the best guy among all the NPCs because technically, he's a drow, best scout. So he technically can go anywhere, but in the book says that he wants to go to Neverlight Grove, and the secret reason for that is that because he is already been spore infested, and he's sort of being drawn to Zogmoy, a demon lord of fungi, and he just wants to go there and serve her. But he uses the excuse that he wants to bring Stool, the Myconid. I can't remember, was it Myconid sapling? The Myconid kid, and he wants to send the Myconid back to his home. So that's something that you you're gonna have to find a way to cover up if you are using Sharif. I actually personally didn't like Sharif. I didn't use Sharif in my running of Audi Abyss. I just used Stu straight away to be the guide to Neverlight Grove. And my players were actually very attached to Stu. So they wanted to bring, they put it upon themselves to send Stu back to Neverlight Grove. Okay, the last NPC that has a place to go would be Shusha. So Shusha is the quota in the group, in the prisoners, and he wants to go. Obviously, he wants to go back to Slupudup, and he has a very strong case of why the characters. I mean, why the characters would want to go to Slupudup with him because uh, if he can arrange for boats to get across the Dark Lake, as I mentioned earlier. So and it's naturally quite the next place to go, by all from all angles for argument. Although like I said, if Jimja makes a very good case, or the players list are more interested of finding the exit as soon as possible, and you put it in the Blinken Snow, then yeah, then they might actually lean towards Jimja more than Shusha. So if you place the exit, if you have they haven't placed a specific exit point for the Underdark, then Shusha's case may be a little bit stronger, and it's easier to entice the players to go to Dark Lake. And Slupuduk will actually be a very important main event happening there, which is where the players will get to meet Demogorgon for the first time. So you as a DM, you do want to make the players be interested to go to Slupuduk, but at the same time, if you're the kind of DM who is a bit more sandboxy uh, type of DM, then you be aware that they may skip Slupuduk entirely. But if you're fine with that, that's fine. Okay. So so these are the NPCs that have a place to go. The other NPCs that don't have a place to go, for example, like the Prince Derendil, the Quagoth, Ront, the Half-Orc, I believe. Yeah. And Eldrith Feldrune technically wants to go back to Contogrim, the female dwarf in Valkenvale. She wants to go back to Contogrim, but she actually doesn't know the way, according to the book. But she has a +5 to her survival, which makes her very useful in the party because you can use her to make wisdom survival checks for navigation. So she becomes more like a utility member. She's actually slightly more useful than the other non-Underdark NPCs like Prince Derendil, Quagoth, and Rond, the Half-Orc. And I'm not sure is there anyone else. And Topsy and Turvy. Topsy and Turvy are the two are also deep gnomes from Dingenstow, but they are also secretly were rats, and there's a rift going on between the deep gnomes and the were rats in Lindenstow. And Topsy and Turvy are actually quite happy to separate themselves from the party to strike out on their own if they have a chance to, because you're gonna read there's a part in the book somewhere it mentions that they they're trying to, I can't remember, something like they were trying to break their curse or something like that, or they didn't want the party to know that they are were rats by nature. Okay, so these are the list of possible destinations that your that the PCs your characters may want to go, thanks because of the NPCs convincing. So that so once the party has decided on a destination, then you will need to check how far it is to that destination. And the book actually has a table for you that you can check up from Welcome Vale to each of the destinations that I've mentioned, which is in page 18. You will find it under the Underdark travel times. So the thing I didn't like about this table is that it gives you the amount of days it takes to get uh, to those destinations. Let's say from Welcome Vale, it takes about 8 days to Slubberdup, 28 days to Grapplestad, 36 days to Neverland Grove, 30 days to Blindenstone, 26 days to Menzel Branson. And why I didn't like about this table in particular was that this was in days, and uh, later on when you start reading into the Underdark travel rules, you will notice there's a thing called travel pace, and the travel pace actually tells you how many miles that your players travel on a daily basis, and depending on the pace they are going on. So there's slow pace, normal pace, fast pace. So it was actually very confusing at first to understand that if why is it if the party travels at a slow pace for the next 8 days, they will reach Lupuduk, and if they travel at a fast pace, they will also take 8 days to reach Lupuduk. So I found out later reading on to the table was that the number of days in the tables is actually based on the normal pace, and according to the travel pace, the normal pace, it goes about 6 miles per day. So I would highly suggest you actually, do the math, figure out the distance between from Falconville to all the locations by miles rather than by day. So you're gonna have to take all the figures and times six, uh, and from there you're gonna find out that's why some places are way much further than they are. Uh, So the furthest, the furthest out of all the locations in the table will be Neverlight Grove, followed by Blindenstone, followed by Krakostad, and then that depends if each of these three locations has an exit to the Underdark. Uh, so like I said, it really depends how you wanna put the exit to the Underdark is, and that and by deciding the destination and the distance, that's gonna affect how much encounters you're gonna have to put in between all those traveling. Uh, Naturally, if like for my group, we actually traveled between all three places, so there were sort of a change of pace between each city. When they were entering the city, there was different things to do in that city alone, so they forgot about the traveling until they got out of the city, and then they had to do the traveling parts all over again. But if you decided that the exit of the Underdark is in one particular location, then you're gonna have to like make the best out of traveling from Welcome Vale to that particular location. All right, so we're gonna talk about the next thing we're gonna talk about is the travel pace. Uh, so the travel pace, as I mentioned earlier, there are three paces, and you're gonna have to check page 18 of the Audio Abyss, which will tell you how fast, how many miles they cover depending on the pace. But what's the reason of having three different type of level paces? Actually, there are mechanical reasons for doing this. Um, so, like for example, fast pace, you travel 8 miles per day, which is two more than the normal pace. But you get -5 to your wisdom perception score, and you can't forage while you're doing that. And that's just what it says in the table, page 18. But there are actually a few more reasons why you would want to travel fast pace, which I'll get to later on when we get to that part. Okay, then you move on to normal pace. Now, so normal pace technically is the most balanced of them all because you can forage, you have no penalties at the same time, and you technically can even notice threats if your perception score is high enough to notice it before they notice you. But then it comes down to the slow pace. So the slow pace only travels 4 miles a day. So it's the really slowest lot. But the thing is, with slow pace, you can actually, according to the book, says that you can actually get more improved foraging, and you're able to use stealth. So by using stealth, actually not only you'll be able to notice threats ahead of time from your perception score, but actually there is a possibility of you to even pull out a surprise on the opposing side if you want to actually surprise them. So depending depending how you run, how you want to organize chapter 2 and how you want to run. Like for me, when I started doing this pacing thing, I actually asked the group what the pace they decided to go for the day. uh, and sometimes, after a while it actually becomes a bit automatic, in a way that if the players are low on food and water, then they will naturally go to slow pace or normal pace. But if they're rushing for time and they want to get to the place as soon as possible, they're going to go fast pace, and if they know they have enough stock of water and food, then they say, let's go fast pace and let's just get as far as possible. uh, I also have to say about this. So yeah, it becomes sort of like a routine at some point, if you decide to talk this with your players. Okay, this is definitely also where the tracking part starts to come in, because as I said, it comes down to the number of miles. So you're gonna have to like create some sort of like tracker. I use an Excel sheet, create a tracker where uh, there's where they are, uh, what pace they're moving at, what's how many miles it is to the destination, and at the end of the day, how many miles are they left if they successfully completed that traveling of that day with that pace. Uh, there will be some obstacles that will not allow them to travel to the full amount of miles per day, which I'll get to it later on. But yeah, that's something that you have to you need to start asking your players like almost every at the start of every traveling day, what pace do you want to go? Okay, and we'll just move on. Okay, so while traveling, there are definitely activities that you can do while traveling. Now, this one actually is actually mentioned in the player's handbook. They do talk about there are certain activities that characters can do while they're traveling, and for some, I have a feeling that some DMs or players may not actually realize that it's actually quite a pretty robust set of rules uh, when traveling, that there are a lot of decisions that players have to make while they're traveling at the same time. So there are basically four main things. They're noticing threats, there's navigation, there's mapping, there's foraging. So in our database, there is sort of like a supplementary variances to those default traveling rules in the player's handbook. Uh, but at the same time, some of it are revisions as well, and I think like it benefits if you want to run, if your group decided to run a more resource management like form of traveling, then these are the activities that the players will have to make big decisions on, other than the travel pace. So, so what I will usually do is after the travel pace, I will also ask them to assign number one is their marching order, who is in the front, rear, and middle, because those have implications of noticing threats, and then I will also ask them which characters and NPCs are assigned to which particular activity while traveling. Because I believe in the player's handbook rules, it sort of like mentions that uh, one character can only be assigned to one activity and they can only do the activity and nothing else. So you can't have players who are like noticing threats at the same time navigating or something like that. The only exception to that, I think, is for rangers who are in their favorite terrain. I think they can forage as well as noticing threat at the same time or something like that. So you're gonna have to pay attention to if your group has a ranger and especially if it's like a Underdark based subclass ranger, for example, like a Gloomstalker or someone who's taken favorite terrain at Underdark as their favorite terrain. There definitely is a lot of benefits to having a ranger as in this chapter, and you definitely want to pay attention to how their exception rules play to the normal rules, because I feel like this is actually one of the few instances where rangers really really shine, which is the traveling parts. So that is, I would definitely take the party composition into consideration or when deciding to decide how to run this chapter. Okay, so noticing threats. Um, so they're just a they're So basically, it's using the passive perception score of the spotter. I call them spotters, and if they beat the DC of the monster's stealth, and some may not actually even be attempting to hide. So I feel like if you can just put an arbitrary number DC, and if the passive perception scores passes that DC, they will be able to notice threats beforehand, uh, and the players will have a moment to stop where they are and think about their next step. But if you're doing the fast pace, then there is definitely -5 to that score. So they sort of they are actually less careful, and the likelihood of them bumping into another encounter without even noticing beforehand, it's can happen with a fast pace. So I'm actually quite confused sometimes when my player actually decides to send someone with the lowest passive perception score to be the spotter, uh, or someone, or if there's someone much higher, has a much higher passive perception score, but they decide to assign that character to do something else, like foraging or navigation, which may not actually be in the best interest of that particular character, or not optimizing that character's skills in doing that. So I guess if you're using noticing, if like you need to tell your players like what does noticing threats do, and let them be aware. They probably will make a quick decision of who's going to be like the constant spotter to the group. And you there's also a chance for you to go through the monster stats for the NPCs that are following the party, and find out what their passive perception score is, and tell that to the players, so at least the players will make a more informed decision in that way. Okay. The next is navigating. So the consequences of not navigating is that your party will immediately get lost. And according to the book here, it says they get lost for 4 hours, and then they also get lost for 1d6 hours later after that. I actually don't find that consequence actually useful or impactful in the context of the whole traveling bit. So I've just generally just summarized it, like says like if you're lost for that day, you actually generally don't make any progress. So if you go on for fast pace, which is 8 miles, you don't cover 8 miles, you cover 0 miles, because you just spend most of the time of that day, just finding your bearings, and no progress was made for that. So so navigation requires you to make a wisdom survival. It has to beat a DC of 16, I believe. No, it doesn't say. That's weird. So actually, becoming lost. The becoming lost rules, actually, I believe is found in the DMG. Let me see if I can just bring that up. Where do you find the becoming lost rules? Yeah, the becoming lost rules are in the DMG, page 111. So definitely that's going to tell you what the DC is set for, depending on the terrain. So Underdark, you know, the terrain for Underdark would be, it could be like it says here: forest and jungle, swamp, mountains, or open sea with overcast skies and no land in sight would be DC 15. So the highest is technically 15 in the DMG. But if you feel that's the number that's too low, or it's the Underdark is not exactly a forest jungle or open sea with overcast skies and no land in sight, so they might be actually higher than 15, 16, or 20, or something like that. This is also one area where travel pace plays a role. If they if the party goes at a slow pace, they get a +5 to that check, for their navigation check, wilderness survival for navigation. If they go at a fast pace, they get a -5. And then not forgetting that Elder herself has a +5 to her to making this wisdom survival for navigation. So if the party goes at a slow pace, and she's assigned as a navigator for the party, it's a total of +10 bonus, which means that the likelihood of passing DC 15, 16 is way higher. The +10, you just need to roll like a 6+ and above to get past that figure. So I would definitely say you should think about the consequences, like change the consequences inside the book for what happens when you get lost. It could imply no progress. It also could imply the draw pursuit gets higher and closer to reach the players for that. Okay. And coming, let's just get back. So that's the second activity that the group needs to decide who to do it. The third would be the mapping. Now, this one, well, there are a few prerequisites. I feel like you want to do the mapping activity, and there's not a lot of suggestions given in the book for what's the benefit of mapping, but it says that it's very useful for retracing steps for the party if they decide to go back, walk around there for some reason. So I guess in a way, like if the party, if you allow for, if one character is a mapper, and he needs to have the cartography tool to be able to map. If he does the mapping, I would probably rule it in a way that if the players have to revisit a certain area and they have already been there before through navigation, then with the help of the map, they will automatically pass the navigation rule, and therefore, you don't need a navigator role, or you don't need someone in the navigator role to go back to the area that's already been mapped. So I guess, and my players actually decided that was actually not important because they were short-handed, so none of them had the cartography 2 proficiency, so no, they didn't really use this particular feature. So I guess it's more like a bonus utility of having a mapper inside the group. But definitely give that option to your player and tell them the benefits of what's the point of doing a mapping. Although technically, if your group is the type that, like I said, if the exit is already at one particular location, then the map doesn't really serve any function because they're just going one way and they're sort of not expecting to come back. But if your exits, if your players have to visit multiple places before they can find an exit, then yes, then the map will definitely help. They will bump into a situation where they will have to retrace their steps, and then the map will help them more than they need to. All right. The last activity they can do is the foraging. Now, this one is actually pretty important because this is going to be one that decides. I mean, like if this foraging is done poorly, uh, there's a potential chance, there's a likely risk that your players are actually going to just starve and just die of thirst. Uh, in the Underdark, and that's actually one of the appeals. I feel like this just shows the danger of the Underdark. Like uh, that was and it's also, like I said, it's the most tedious part of the resource management because the players are going to have to check their water supplies, they're going to check their food supplies almost every day, and it gets, and if they themselves don't have some kind of tracking material, whether it's Excel sheet or just a piece of paper with columns, drawing tables, that sort of thing, then it's going to be actually very frustrating for the players, and that's why I say you need to check with your players like, are they willing to go that far to do this, because it's part of the fun but also part of the frustration as well. So all right, so before we get into the foraging, you need to understand that in the player's handbook itself, there's actually a whole section about food and drink, food and water or something like that. I think that would be page, let's see if I got the page number. Food and water in the player's handbook, page 185. That's where you find out what is the minimum requirement of food and water that each character has to have a day. So for food, it's 1 pound of food a day. For water, it's about 1 gallon of water a day, and if any kind of food, they can actually go without food for 3+ constitution modifier days before they suffer levels of exhaustion. And the same for water, if in the sense that if they drink half of the amount, they drink, in other words, half a gallon a day, they have to make a con save or suffer exhaustion. But if they don't even drink half that amount, they have less than half a gallon of water a day, then they will suffer exhaustion immediately at the end of that day. And it actually gets worse like the longer they don't have access to water. So thirst is definitely more dangerous than hunger, but that's your baseline. That you want to tell your players to make sure that they always have at least 1 pound of food and 1 gallon of water each day, and with a larger escape party with the other NPCs, there's actually quite a number of mouths to feed and water and a number of mouths to feed and water to find each day. So that's where the foraging rules comes in. So So the foraging rules are actually found in the Dungeon Master's Guide. You see, so you see, there's a lot, there's a lot of rules actually that need. The book doesn't actually mention they are in a Dungeon Master's Guide, but I had to go through the Dungeon Master's Guide to find, oh, okay, this is how foraging works in Dungeons and Dragons, and it's actually quite, they would definitely have, they definitely could have just done a better job, pointing DMs in the right direction, and no one's gonna be, no one's gonna tell you this, uh, if no one, if I didn't make this video, and you know, I'm not even sure if how many people in the Facebook group actually noticed this as well, because I don't ever see it mentioned. I never see it brought up. So I guess because that's maybe a majority of the DMs felt that the traveling part is actually very tedious to do, and the group doesn't want to go through that, and therefore they just shorten it in a way, which I feel like it's a shame in a way, because that's a good portion of the materials are there, but if by not using it you're just skipping up people's hard work. Anyway, so the foraging rules are in the Dungeon Master's Guide, page 111, and that's where you're gonna this way gonna tell you what sort of check that the forager can do at the end of the day, which is the wisdom survival, uh, and depending on the DC of the terrain, the availability of food and water. So there are basically three levels of availability: 10, 15, 20 DC. So I use the very little, if any, food and water resources, because I don't really think that the Underdark is sort of crawling with all kinds of food, readily available at any time. So I just use the highest DC, which is DC 20, that the forager has to make a wisdom survival to beat. And if they and it's actually not a bad thing, because if they do beat that DC, they actually get 1d6 plus character's wisdom modifier of food, and have to make they had to roll another 1d6 plus wisdom modifier for water. So that's actually quite a bit, depending how high the wisdom modifier of the group is. Because let's say if you get, like, someone with a wisdom of 20, that's a +5, and if you roll d6 and you get a 6, that's 5 plus 6, that's 11 pounds of food, but he has to make a second roll for water. Now here's the real kicker. Depending on the number of foragers that the party assigns, each forager gets to make this wisdom survival check, and also the amount of food and water they get. So that's actually a pretty big deal, in a way that the more foragers that they assign to the party, and if they have a good wisdom survival, uh, the more amount of water and food they will actually get from each foraging day. Now, this actually becomes even more powerful if the group has a ranger, because I think the ranger has one of the class features, or was it the Outlander background? Maybe I just give a quick check. There was a feature, I think it was the Outlander. Let me just double check. Okay, so the Outlander background has a feature called Wanderer, and you can find food and fresh water for yourself and up to 5 other people each day, provided that land offers very small game, water, and so forth. Now this is quite a problem, because it's just sort of arbitrarily says that the the Wanderer feature just gives 5 people food, 5 other people. So that's yourself and 5 other people. So that's technically 6 pounds of food and 6 pounds of water free, provided that the land offers very small game and water and so forth. So you as a DM, you could argue that the Underdark doesn't have those features, and therefore the Outlander would have to make those checks as well. But that's just like a pretty heavy-handed way to nerf a background feature. So you're gonna have a talk with that player who takes the Outlander. Like if the player takes an Outlander, ask him, give him a heads up that this particular feature may not work in Underdark, so he may want to reconsider his choices. So I think the one that I was talking about was the Ranger favored terrain, because that's the one that's gonna throw off your the Natural Explorer. Is it Natural Explorer? Alright, yeah. Natural Explorer, Ranger feature. He gets it at level 1, and if he picks the favorite terrain, um, one of the benefits of having of having the Underdark as his favorite terrain is that when you forage, you find twice as much food as you normally would. So it really depends how you want to rule this. It could be you could just say 2d6 plus your wisdom modifier, or you could say 1d6 plus your wisdom modifier times 2, which is the ruling I went with when I was doing this. So when we had a ranger in the party, and she was just, DC 20 was not difficult for her to beat, and when she rolled the d6, when she rolled the d6 plus a wisdom modifier, she was generally just giving out food, like as if it was a charity party, and at some times that there was too much food. And this is the second part of the foraging that you might want to consider, is the number of containers that the group has. So the group has to be able to know how much containers do they have, how many pack of trail rations can they pack, how many water skins do they have to carry the water. If they find too much food, too much water, if they can't carry it, then all that amount of food goes to waste. That's a part of the resource management that can be very frustrating at times. But I felt that, that was also quite the appeal of it. But that it's going to involve a lot of math, and it's going to result a lot of distribution. A lot of time is going to be spent on distributing the food and water to everyone to make sure that everyone is fed for that day. And you also don't have to you have to remember that you technically can use the food that you forage, the food and water that you forage, and consume it for the requirement of the day. In other words, you don't have to spend a pound of food and a pound of like trail rations and the water skins to fulfill your requirement, and then regain it back from the foraging. You technically can just use the food that was foraged to eat it and drink it straight away. So technically that cuts down a little bit on the surplus, but like I said, involves a lot of math, involves a lot of tracking. So that's the level of complexity that this whole activity of foraging and resource management comes in. So, like I said, frustrating or fun, can go either way. Um, so, like I, so as I mentioned before, the container may play a particular role in this. Uh, and trial rations are basically just a pound. So you can safely say like one trial ration equals to 1 pound of food, and therefore, just by eating a trial ration, they're done. And any excess food they find, they can pack it into trial rations. Although I believe that in the book itself, yeah, in the book itself, they do give options that instead of using foraging for fungi that they find, they can actually cut up corpses of animals or beasts that they slay, and they can then turn them into food based on the size. Yeah, based on the size. And there actually is even rules for how long those foods last, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, there's a matter of spoilage. So that's actually another level, another depth, another layer of complexity that comes with the resource management. That not only do they have to track the amount of food and water they have, they also have to track which ones goes out, which one spoils at which particular time of day. So yeah, you can sort of understand why this is a very big deal if you want to do it how the book presents it. There's so many hidden layers and complexity involved, and tracking and deciding that some players may just find it very, very frustrating, as my players did. Okay, so what else? So those are the four main activities while traveling. Um, like I said, if you decide to do a more fast travel pace, none of this may matter, because the players just want to get from point A to point B, and they just want to move on to the next place. So which we will do. Let's just move on to the next point. All right. So encounter setup, right? Um, so according to here, the things that you want that you want to consider for setting up encounters is, you need to know, as a DM, you need to know two things, basically the marching order, and also the illumination that is of that on the encounter area. So here they just give, in terms of marching order and spacing, basically, I feel like it's just important enough to know who is in the front and who is in the rear rank. So if you're wondering what the hell am I talking about, there is actually a marching order set of rules in the Traveling for Player's Handbook, Chapter 8. Let me just see if I can find that quickly. Alright, so it's under activity while traveling. Not sure if I can pull out a page number. I didn't bring all my books with me, so I had to use like a digital copy just to see where the things are. But you know, if I do future videos and I need to refer to the player's handbook or DMG, I will definitely try to bring my physical copy if I can, to show you that, you know, I'm not pirating this stuff. Okay. Yeah. So activity while traveling is in page 182 of the player's handbook, which the first header talks about marching order. Uh, so why is the importance of marching order? Well, you know, it's definitely the place for noticing threats. Although technically you can have a spotter placed in the middle rank, which is something that I'll talk about later on when it comes to random encounters. In the sense that the person encounters usually happen in front of the group, so therefore you should only just take the ones in the front rank. You should take the perception of those in the front rank to spot those encounters. So you only use the uh, passive perception of those characters who are assigned to notice threats and also placed at the front rank. Although technically you could say that the same applies for those in the rear rank. They are assigned to notice threats and they are in the rear rank. So they will be able to notice threats that come from behind them. And also the same will apply to those in the middle rank. If for some, although typically the party formation will be, you know, the forager, the navigator, and the mapper would be in the middle rank, and then you assign, you know, spotters in the front and rear for both sides. There can be certain threats that, you know, just come from the middle and attack the party in the middle, and you if there's someone who spots who's assigned spotter job on the middle rank, yeah, they could make a difference. So by setting, but that's basically what the book suggests for you to uh, set up an encounter, to know of, to always to so you always have to ask the party when they set out the traveling for the rest of the day, what is their marching formation, and also illumination is also mentioned here. So you know, it's the Underdark. So generally everything is always dark. Although the encounter setup in the books does make it a random roll, like 1 to 3 is a dim light, and the dim light can come from different sources. It can come from fluorescent fungi, or it can come from the Feyres, which is, you know, the Feyres always provides dim light because of the magical radiation and aura it causes, or if it's a 4 to 6, it's always in darkness. So darkness will come into play depending on the light source and depending on the eyesight of the characters. Like if the one who's noticing threats doesn't have dark vision, you know, he probably has, you know, can't see any threats ahead of him, or disadvantage if you want. Although that also brings up that whole portion of even if a character has dark vision and in a situation of darkness, he only actually has dim light vision. He does not have bright light vision. So that actually causes disadvantages to his perception checks, which is something maybe a lot of people notice. And if they are in dim light, the party would still want to carry a light source, because only by carrying a light source they would that within the radius of the light source they are always in bright light. So let me just double check. Within a specified range, a creature can see in dim light as if it were bright light, and darkness as if it were dim light. Okay, so that's still not too bad. So if a dark vision characters will still see areas in dim light as bright light. So that's actually good. So if they're in a dim light area, if they're in an encounter that's set in dim light, it will be considered as bright light. But it's like I said, it's definitely not beneficial if they are in darkness and you don't have any kind of light source. So, you know, your players, that actually puts your players to think about what kind of light source do they want to carry. Based on these rules, it would definitely be beneficial to just carry dim light with dark vision. But if for some whatever reason, you know, my party had like a human and a dragonborn which didn't have dim light, which didn't have dark vision, so they practically had to just carry like a torch with them. And as we all know, torches are like just a freaking beacon of of attention. Okay, so that's the encounter setup. I'll talk a little bit more about creating random encounters that will tie into the encounter setup, because uh, there's a lot of flexibility that you can do with creating random encounters based on these rules. But yeah, we'll get to that later on. So moving on. Okay, narrating the journey. All right. So the book has a very small section on this. Let me just try to give it a quick glance and see what does it say. Narrating the journey. All right. So it recommends that you always make the trek sound long and arduous. The underground, they overcome incredibly difficult and rough terrain without any comfort of the surface world. Food and water are scarce. The darkness never ends. The players should feel as though their characters are in peril throughout the travels, never knowing when something is set to leap at them from the shadows. Second, the exotic is an underdark alien landscape unlike anything found on the surface world. Throughout its twisted passageways and impossibly large caverns, characters might find bizarre reminders of lost and forgotten civilizations, unearthly flora and fauna, and incredible geography. Little as it seems, and most is difficult to explain or even to describe. That's about it. That's just all it gives advice on how to narrate the journey. And it reading back on this, I guess it does hit on a few important points. But if it doesn't, these are not exactly words that would strongly stir your imagination. So I guess for me, it just comes down to a few principles. Um, long and arduous journey is already, it's gonna feel that way just if you're just doing the whole resource management mechanic by itself. But I would say, like, playing in Underdark has a unique opportunity for you to emphasize on things that you wouldn't normally be able to do on a surface medieval fantasy kind of setting. You will definitely try to emphasize the weird. Uh, you know, uh, you have things that grow, or that have overgrown sizes like fungi. You have certain creatures that may have like an underdark version of them. Like Roths, giant spiders, giant cockroaches, if you want them to be. You have also have things like the exotic, just weird things that you will never see on the surface world, and because of the very special nature of the Underdark, and partly also because of the fey race that may cause certain weird growths or weird life forms to take root in the Underdark. They can only exist in the Underdark. So yeah, and the last thing is also the danger. So basically, it's just like they said, the four keywords: weird, wondrous, exotic, and dangerous. Yeah, this just use this as your four guiding principles when it comes to like creating your encounters, or creating, or describing the journey for the players, to the players as they are, as their characters are traveling through. Um, yeah, that was generally the principle that I use, but it can involve quite a number of work for descriptions, and it's a good exercise. I feel like if you just think along these four ways and complementing what's mentioned in the book, uh, you know, helps to set the tone, and that helps to set the atmosphere for the players as they are just traveling through. So yeah, if you're having a hard time, just think about the four keywords: weird, wonders, exotic, and danger. Yeah, I think that sort of encapsulates much of the feel of the Underdark. There are definitely more weirder things and better ways to do it, but this is just a good starting point for you to move on. All right. Speaking of moving on, so all of I mentioned, especially the parts about the activity in Underdark, the travel pace, and all this. This is that's like the long version of the Underdark travel. That's like the hard part of the Underdark travel. But the book actually does give you some recommendations, like how about just skipping, if you don't want to do the traveling like day by day, you can actually, there's like a fast version travel of it, and that's actually under the summarizing the travel. Let's find it there. That's in page 30. patiently out of the abyss. So you can consider this like the easy mode of the Underdark travel if you wanted to, instead of like like the book generally just tells you to check for random encounters every day, twice a day actually in fact, uh, while traveling and while sleeping. But in if you want to like shorten the length time for your group to spend in the traveling on the Underdark, use the summarizing travel section to where they just basically say instead of every day, make the checks like after like 1d6 plus 1 days or something like that. Yeah, 1d6 of plus 1 days, and just assume that nothing happens within that 1d6 plus 1 days, and then the next encounter happens during after that amount of time. So by then you can like if like let's say you roll a 6, you get plus 1, you have 7 days, and then that's 7 days of nothing happens. So if the party decides to like travel fast-paced travel for 7 days, then that's how much ground they cover until the next encounter happens. But then you need to decide like uh, how much food do they get out of those 7 days from the foraging checks, and uh, do they still have enough? Like, does anyone suffer exhaustion after that 7 days as a result of of traveling fast paced when there was no foraging? Yeah. So by using the summarizing travel rules, you drastically cut down the number of time spent on the traveling, but it might be the balance between overdoing it day by day and not doing it at all as fast traveling. So I think that this was something that my group feedback to me, that like they would have preferred something along these lines, like something more middle ground compared to the two extremes. All right. Now, the next section in the book would be to talk about the equipment. It's a small section, not really that great, but it does brings up another interesting layer to the traveling of the Underdark, that the players will have to think about is how do they secure equipment. Like I said, like depending on how well they did in Velgenvelf, they may not have a lot of equipment, and you know like I mentioned before, just earlier, that probably one of the most important equipment they're going to need is containers for their food and water. And I forgot to mention this earlier, but in the sense that a water skin, according to the PHB, carries 4 pints worth of liquids. And I was doing, coming from someone who doesn't use the imperial system, 4 pints generally translates to about half a gallon of water. So that actually means that a character needs to have 2 water skins to fulfill their daily quota of water a day. And that's 2 water skins per character, and that's times the number of characters in the party, including NPCs. That may be actually a lot of water uh, needed for the party, and you're gonna need that amount of water skins as well. So like if there's not enough water skins, for the party for each character, then the whole danger of thirst is gonna set in, because you can't carry the water that you can't carry. As simple as that, and you're gonna have to like drink the water as they find it. Yeah. So that's definitely like equipment they need to find. They will need to find as they go along and traveling, and there are actually quite a few opportunities where the characters will be able to find equipment that they need. Number one is what the book recommends here is that they can just use crafting. They use their downtime activities to craft for the items that they need. The only downside to that is they will need to have access to the tools that can be used to create those equipment. So uh, I mean, the tools are already available in the player's handbook, but if you really want to expand the usage of tools, I would definitely recommend checking out Zenata's guide, because they really expand on what you can use the tools to do with, besides just making whatever they make. Uh, they may be even tied to certain skill checks. So, if crafting is going to be like a major part of your traveling in the Underdark, then yeah, I would definitely say also check out Zetata's guide to see how you can actually improve the value of tools other than just making stuff. The next piece of equipment that is quite important to the group would be the spell components. So that's as I mentioned in the book. But I don't really find that one really that difficult, because if let's say your starting equipment for most of the group is they have a focus of some kind, then just use the focus as just let them get back their focus, and you pretty much solve your material component. Although on the flip side, if you really want to make traveling more challenging, it's a great opportunity to make players collect the specific material components that they have to find in the Underdark. Maybe make it a special kind of foraging check where they have to roll and find specific components with specific spells of a specific level or something like that. That's definitely one avenue you can explore to make activity while traveling a little bit more exciting and interesting. But it comes with the downside that it adds another layer of math. Okay. Um, the next thing about traveling in the Underdark is the madness. So uh, I didn't really play a lot with madness in my campaign, in my running of Out the Abyss, and like I said, I might have said this before. They actually use the house rule version of madness because the default madness rules in the Out the Abyss and also in the Dungeon Master didn't really appeal to me that much because it's like the worst kind. It's an indefinite madness, which is a permanent flaw, and the flaw, the ideal bond and flaw system was not really useful for my group. We didn't really follow it close to the letter, and it wasn't really that great. So I had to devise like my own different system. But I'll not get into that because at the end of the day, it didn't really make the game any better for my group. Uh, it just involves like 3 levels of madness, and then your character is technically treated as dead. Like you can't play the character until the character's healed of his madness. But maybe I'll talk about it some other time. I'm not sure. But in any case, this is actually where page like 21. Page 21 is actually the whole entire section about how madness works in Out the Abyss. So if you like I think my pre-prep video I mentioned about thinking about how to use madness and how madness can be deadly in Out the Abyss. Yeah, so this is the page number that you want to always refer to constantly about looking for how madness works out in Out the Abyss. So I'll just go through it quite quickly in this one because basically there are just 3 causes of madness. Number one is the Fey race. So uh, spending too much time in an area of phase race because of the demon lord influences. Basically, it says 8 hours, but I would just say like if spending a long rest in an area of phase race, is just risking wisdom check. This a wisdom check. Okay, it doesn't really say here, but yeah, it's definitely a saving throw. It's definitely a saving throw to not get madness if you sleep in a phase race. Now, why would you want to sleep in an area with phase race if you know it can cause madness? There is an upside to that risk, which I think I'll talk about that. No, you know what? I think I'll just talk about that right now. Yeah. So there's another section inside in audio based page, also page 21, which has like a whole rundown of what the phase race does in the Underdark. So I definitely like recommend you reading that part. Because phase race is actually quite a big part to play in the Underdark traveling parts. Uh, so basically, the phase race prevents teleportation magic and gives saving throw bonuses to against divination magic. Uh, and strange happenings. There are random encounters that can cause madness just by being there. One particular really good example is always every time they see a demon lord. It was hard for me to describe a demon lord effectively the first time. They are not really that weird or compared on kind of weirder creatures they are out there like Cthulhu or something like that. But just enforce to your players that the sight of a demon lord is just is more is less weird and more like so repulsive that they had to suffer saving throw for madness. So that's the second way that players can get madness if they like just sees. It may not always be a demon lord. Like I think some random encounters just say like this. It's just horrid sounds, like just weird sounds coming from players, and you have to make a saving throw against madness. I mean, the book usually just covers a good range of examples or exceptions. when they have to make a madness level check, and it may be a bit more rampant than you might expect, but that depends on how severe the consequences are of failing madness. Like for in my case, it was actually quite dangerous to fail madness, so you may want to make it less often if they have to make a madness saving throw for no good reason. And like I said, if you're using madness rules, like you want madness to play a very big part in all the abyss, then I would probably suggest using the sanity score rules rather than the wisdom saving throws. Okay. The third reason that the third reason third cause of suffering from madness saving throws is if the players take psychic damage. Yeah, take psychic damage, or if you want to be a bit more lenient about it, take psychic damage within a Feyre's area. So this actually brings up you know, I didn't pay attention to that particular part of the cause of madness caused by psychic damage because I actually didn't notice it until like much later on. But you know, that if you start throwing encounters at them and more deadlier than those that doesn't. But then again, it also comes down to how dangerous you want to make that madness into your game. Okay, so let's just move on. Okay, so death is covered in the book. Basically, just to deal with what happens. Let's say when one of the party members die while traveling. What can you do about it? Or what should you do about it? This sort of thing. Um, their recommendation is basically just to say that, you know, let them play one of the other NPCs, or they maybe bump into the new character who's like spending some time in Underdark, and they join the party and therefore form the new characters, or even going as far as like giving free resurrections from the Feyres. But there are also like down penalties when resurrected by the face race, page 22. Yeah, so yeah, if they are brought back to life by the face race, then they have one level of madness increase for being brought to life. Yeah, some of the more drastic ones is that if they are left behind, a priestess of love may actually even cast raise dead on them or speak information about the rest of the party. But those examples, there are actually quite a good number of examples in uh, of how to deal with death. Although generally I was actually a bit more inclined to, you know, if the character dies and if you have no means of resurrecting the character, then just create a new one, and you know, just join the party somehow in what way, which is better to work out between a DM and player. Or if I mean like if the players are actually open to the idea of playing one of the NPCs, then there actually may be a good reason why you want to have the NPCs to tag along. I mean have a higher number of NPCs to tag along, and you have to remember also in the book. Technically, in the book, they present chances for you to meet NPCs, not just the ones from Velvet Valve. There are actually a lot more NPCs that you can meet along the way, and some may actually even join you to go to live at Underdark, or you know just join you for the rest of the travels from the first half. So you have as a DM, I would say like just try to entertain the possibility of death, and how would you handle character death when the players are traveling under dark, because there's not a lot of great avenues. There's not a lot of the usual avenues that are open up to you. So there's probably a good place for you to do some twists. And you definitely also want to check with your players, like how would they want to handle deaths of their characters. Like, are they expecting death? Like, expecting every encounter to be deadly? Or, you know, how would they work a new character in the middle of the Underdark as they're traveling? Yeah. So I guess it's better to have a more collaborative talk between DM and player on handling death. For me, I wasn't really out to kill my characters. Although I mean, like, if I did tell my players, like, if the dice rolls what way it was, and if it causes a death, that's as bad as it is. Like, it's the dice's fault per se. but I was not going out on the intention to kill them, unless it was either by luck or by sheer stupidity on the creator's part. Okay, so I'll just move on. Death. Okay. Fungi of the Underdark. Now, I've already, like I mentioned, make a list. Definitely, you definitely benefit a lot from making a list of the fungi that are available, and especially the ones that like edible fungi. Page 22. They are certain fungi can provide both food and water. Certain fungi only provide water, like the water orb. Uh, then you have fungi like the barrel stock, which provides 1d4 plus 4 gallons of water and 1d6 plus 4 pounds of food. And when do the characters encounter this fungi? Actually, there is a random encounter section uh, where one of the encounters they would stumble upon that you could possibly roll is the fungus cavern. So it's really up to you, like if you want to just randomly generate fungi according to the numbers they were provided, which I probably did list them down. So there are 9 edible fungi, and uh, there are 6 exotic fungi. So, 9 is not exactly a D10, but you could just add a number and just say, re-roll the table, and plus re-roll the table twice or something like that, and they will get those different type of fungi. So yeah, so having this list is definitely going to help you a lot when you create random encounters, when you generate random fungi for the group to find, especially if they stumble upon a fungus cave. So, and that's the edible part. The exotic ones are actually more interesting because you bump into things like there was one that could just like Timask, the devil's mushroom. Um, so Timask, the devil's mushroom, causes poisonous spores and DC 14 con save or be poisoned. But actually, if your players actually start collecting this Timask a little bit earlier on, it actually becomes an important ingredient later, much later in the second half of the adventure, where there's a specific number of Timask or devil's mushroom that the players have to collect together for a special component, the dark heart, or the heart of darkness, the one the talisman that they use to summon the demon at the end of the adventure. So that's, yeah, the TMS is actually a very like it's close to being a quest item, as well as being a exotic fungi that they find. Uh, like it really depends how you want to do the fungus cavern. You could just roll one. You could roll a d10 for the edible fungi, and you could roll like a d6 for the exotic fungi that they find, or you can just roll both. Like it really depends how you want to randomize the distribution of the fungi they find in the fungus cavern. Okay, so that's the fungi. Um, okay, now the next important section would be the job pursuit. Uh, I can only speak to you about how to use the job pursuit from my ideas, but I can't speak to you from experience, because like I said, I didn't use the job pursuit mechanic uh, when I was running All the Abyss for the first half. But as I was just going through it, I felt that how I would implement this into my running of All the Abyss, if I get to run it again, is that this definitely has an impact to your players' decision on their travel pace, because one of the basically how the job pursuit works is that there's basically 5 levels, and they start at level 0. Uh, basically, if at the end of the day, if the job pursuit level reaches 5, then the tracking party actually catches up to them, and then combat ensues, and they'll have to deal with whoever is being sent to pursue them from Vulcan Valve, because they are escaped slaves, so they want to get their slaves back, and they'll be pursued all the way to job pursuit level to 0 to 5. So there are definitely things that can cause the increase in the pursuit level, and there are also things that can reduce the pursuit level. So that's definitely, that's a lot of important decisions. That's probably like the uh, driving factor of how the players decide, or how do they want to proceed with the traveling of the day, because they will try to definitely reduce the pursuit level as much as possible. Is their pursuit level. Um, if you really want to, you can sort of foreshadow this in a way. Letting the players know that they're being pursued, and the sort of danger level that they can expect if the draw catches up to them. Although personally, given that this is a mechanic that fluctuates quite a bit, it can go 0 to 5, and then once if 5 it goes back to 0 again, and then can go back to 5. That since it can happen multiple times, I may actually try to adjust the deadliness of the encounter of the tracking party to the level of the party. Although the book itself actually does give you like a straight up a predetermined tracking party composition, which contains the drawn pieces of love. These are all the stat blocks from the monster manual, so you need to check those out. The draw pieces of love, 2 elite draw warriors, a priest, but having some adjusted to the drow, and let's see, and 4 draw warriors. So that's technically quite challenging for a low level party. I think the draw pieces of love is about like level CR 10, if I'm not mistaken. Just check that out. CR8, draw pieces of love is just CR8 by herself. And that's just adding on, and she's being followed by elite warriors and a priest and 4 other warriors. So that's actually a pretty sizable opponent to face. So you might want to just like foreshadow to the PCs as they are making the travel that danger is never far behind them, and they will have to make decisions based on not getting caught. So what are the ways that the pursuit level can increase, and what are the ways the pursuit can decrease? So according to the book, which I probably have summarized it here. Okay, to decrease pursuit level, it's to travel fast pace, or make a recent survival DC 16 to cover tracks, cross and terrain feature that obscures their trail that obscures their trail. Example would be like a subterranean river, or splitting the party splits up. So that's one. Those are the ways that are offered in the book to reduce the pursuit level. Now the ways to increase the pursuit level. The party stumbles upon or creature encounter, unless they bypass or avoid it. So that's actually playing a part into the noticing threats role. Like if the noticing threats does find like there's a creature encounter and they decide to engage with the creature, then the pursuit level actually goes up. But if they stumble upon the creature and they don't, and they're probably using slow pace, and they decided to use stealth to avoid the engagement with the creature encounter, then there is a chance that they would be able to not increase the pursuit level. But at the same time, going slow pace actually increases the draw pursuit. So that's so may not be worth the only reason why you want to go slow pace is to improve your foraging and improve your perception. But at the same, it has the downside where you're increasing the draw pursuit level as well. All right. Certain terrain encounters that's inside the book does specifically mention that the draw pursuit level actually goes up by 1 just for the sake of it. Although that's something that I felt is a bit too heavy-handed, and some of the terrain encounters are actually it doesn't make a lot of sense without context. So, which I'll talk about about creating context for some of these random encounters. But yeah, you can definitely utilize certain terrain encounters, and they're typically usually the ones that slows the party down, or typically the ones that if the party doesn't decide to go ahead with that particular terrain, they have to make a detour, and therefore they lose time, and therefore they increase the pursuit level. uh, the one idea that I would have used is that if the party gets lost, they fail their navigation check, and they not only lose progress for the day in terms of travel distance, but they also increase the pursuit level by one. I will have that's what I would do. Which that therefore that puts a lot of importance to the navigation role character, and don't put someone who has like a very low wilderness survival proficiency modifier. Okay, uh, and given that there's five pursuit levels, as it's a fluctuating, probably a thing that fluctuates up and down very often. As a DM, if you want to let your players be aware, let keep the players, keep it a secret from your players that they are being pursued, then you have to create your own tracker of some kind, and keep track of where the current pursuit level is at. If your players are already aware that they're being pursued, and you just want to sort of like throw something into the decision making process, then definitely you can like just tell them how the pursuit level of 1 to 5 works, and let them do the tracking as they make their own decision, and let that influence their decision of what they want to do for the traveling of the day. Okay, so this video is already gone on for about 1 hour and 40 minutes, and I feel like I'm just about to get to the heart, the biggest part, biggest chunk of uh, running chapter 2. But I feel like if I go on talking, it's going to be really really long, and the last thing I want to do to you guys is like have a 3 or 5 hour video to talk about this one entire chapter. So I think I'm just gonna stop it here today, because I've covered most of the, I would say like 80%, and I want to have a more concentrated 20% to talk about really any challenge. So I'm going to stop the video here today, and I'm going to come back, hopefully soon, just to talk about creating random encounters in the Underdark. And I have devised my own methods, and I'll tell you, and I can share with you how well it went. uh, and maybe I'm not sharing it because I think it's the perfect way. I'm just sharing you to give some general idea of what to think about, and you can create your own ways of doing this. uh, what I was aiming for was something that was more procedural, more random, um, more, and a little bit quick on the fly for prep, because I don't want to it's not really I didn't find it advisable to spend too much time on prep to create random encounters. So I wanted something fast, but something feasible as well. So I'll talk about random encounters in the next video. So I hope this video and endings this video right now, where it is right now, has been helpful to you. Brings up a lot of questions, and probably have some, and for you to come up with your own answers, because at the end of the day, this video is not about me telling you how to run out the abyss. This is a video for me to give you some ideas and pointing out some highlights of what was left out, or what I felt was useful to know ahead before running out the abyss. So I hope this video is going to be helpful to you guys. uh, I mean, if you have comments, you have suggestions, you have questions you want to ask, feel free to drop them in the YouTube comments, or you can find me in the Out of the Abyss. I'll see you in the next video. We are going to talk about creating random encounters for chapter 2, Out of the Abyss. So I hope you have a great time. Thank you for watching.